Nash, traditional farming methods may not be enough to feed the world's growing population, but new technologies could be the answer.
Now, this issue is going to be discussed at a conference in Canberra today, which is going to be attended by some of the world's top experts on so-called agri-tech. Among them, the director of the US Department of Agriculture, Dr. Sonny Ramaswamy, who is in our Canberra studio. Dr. Ramaswamy, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here.
Now, we've got limited resources and we have a growing population. It doesn't look like a great combination.
Indeed. Yeah, we've got, I like to say that nutritional security for this burgeoning population projected to be about 9.5 billion plus in just another 30 years or so. I like to say that it's an existential threat. And the challenge that we've got is to meet the food and nutritional security of this population in the context of everything from climate change to diminishing land and water resources, changing incomes and diets. And oh, by the way, along with that, there's an expectation that everybody's going to be healthy as well. And then we, unfortunately, collectively, globally, we do not have the commensurate investments that we need to be making to make those transformative discoveries that we desperately need. And so that's the context that we're at right now.
It's such a huge jigsaw puzzle. It's hard to know which piece you tackle first. But let's talk first about those investments that you spoke of. What investments are most needed at this point to make sure that at least some of these problems are solved in future?
Yeah, it's it's multifaceted. Everything from what is going to happen on the ground on farms and ranches, all the way to what happens at our dinner table in our homes as well. And in fact, I like to say that it's not so much the fact that we need to be producing more food. We know how to produce food, actually. A lot of the food goes to waste, particularly in the developed world, such as Australia and the United States and Western Europe. And in the developing countries of the world, a lot of the food ends up being lost to insects and pathogens and rodents and things like that. So right now, I mean, what I like to call is the low-hanging fruit is to focus on addressing this food loss and food waste. In fact, in the Western world, we waste up to about a third or maybe up to half of the food that we purchase. Half of it. And in the developing world, almost half of the food is lost before the dinner table. And in fact, if you go to the United States, the Economic Research Service of the United States Department of Agriculture, in a study that they did, said to us that Americans are wasting 131 billion with a B pounds of food per year. And so that's those low-hanging fruit that we need to be much smarter about how we consume food, how we save it, how we store it, how we process it, how we transport it. So all the logistical aspects of food waste and food loss is something that needs to be done right away. And we need some transformative discoveries there. And then, go ahead, please.
As you mentioned, we're good at producing food. We know how to do that. In Australia, similar to the US, of course, particularly California, we've got lots of farmers under severe drought. Yeah. A lot of farmers changing their crops, for example, for ones that are more sort of climate change friendly. Mm-hmm. What should be going on the ground? What should producers of food be looking at to try and sort of optimize the changing climatic conditions and making sure that they can not only keep an income, but also provide food for those who need it?
Right. Indeed, yeah. I mean, you've got California right now and Australia for the last several years have been the poster children in regards to the impact of the changing climate and the droughts that we've seen as well. And again, the kind of transformative discoveries that we need in regards to better water utilization, that is, looking at animals and plant genetics and improving those so that they become much more effective and efficient at utilizing the water, better ways to move water around, get it to where it's needed in regards to the kind of irrigation type things that we need to be doing. And along with that, really looking at using data and looking at the soil conditions, the soil health, capturing and in quotes, sequestering more of the carbon in the soil itself these are some of the things that need to be happening. And indeed, you know, many scientists around the world and many of the agencies like my agency, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, we're making the investments that we need to. President Obama and the USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack and Secretary of State John Kerry came up with this idea about a global alliance for climate-smart agriculture. And the intent behind that is to work collaboratively across the globe in coming up with ways to help these farmers deal with the vagaries of climate and diminishing water resources. And, oh, by the way, as you aptly said, that we need to make sure that these farmers are not only producing the food that we need, but that they're actually also benefiting economically as well. That is, they're putting a few more dollars in their pockets. We've got to be very mindful of the fact that we need to ensure the economic well-being of the farmers. If you don't do that, you'll have fewer and fewer people actually going into the farming enterprise.
And finally, you're mentioning there the support of John Kerry and President Obama. How important is having politicians backing not only innovation, but also the fact that climate change is actually happening, turning these discoveries into policy?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, that's going to be a critical part of it. You know, but I tell you, what's been happening at the national levels in many countries, the leaders of those countries, and along with the politicians, are providing the impetus, the vision to try to address issues pertaining to climate change and droughts and things like that. That's certainly one part of it, and having the appropriate policies and regulations is a component of that as well. But really, more importantly, you got to have the buy-in from the public at large as well. And if the public does not buy into the idea that they need to be much more mindful of the challenges that we've got in regards to, for example, climate change with the continued burning of fossil fuels that's contributing to greenhouse gases, these are all having an impact. And so it's not enough for the political leaders to provide the vision and the policies, et cetera, the framework, but really, at the end of the day, it's the consumers that need to be buying into this and then making the sorts of changes that we need to be doing as well. So it needs to come from both sides. And, you know, the research that we're supporting in regards to what we refer to as sustainable intensification, that is to intensify our ability to produce food, needs to be juxtaposed from the other side, like two bookends of the public being mindful and into what we refer to as sustainable consumption as well. So those two things coming together will get us to a better spot. And being really largely driven by having a much better sense of the data and utilizing data to drive these things. And so this idea about big data is what's driving a lot of the sorts of accomplishments that we're making.
Dr. Sonny Ramaswamy, such a pleasure to meet you. Have a wonderful day and few days in Canberra, and hopefully we'll chat to you soon and see how it all goes.
Indeed. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.